Hi, I'm Rob from Octiga. What I want to talk about today is continuous audit and how we would continuous audit for our clients, given our MSP and our support contract with our clients. Now, audit might be something that we do periodically. It might be requested by a client. It might be done after a potential security incident or a security breach, or it might be paid for as upsell consulting. Either way, I want to talk about some aspects of what makes a good audit, what are the issues with auditing 365, and how Octiga can help with all of that. Now, what I'm not going to get into today the particular settings and configurations and things that you might want to check in an Office 365 security audit. That could be for another session. But what I want to talk about first is what makes a good audit and how we can implement that and how Octiga can help. So, for example, the first thing I'd like to say is audits are visibility of the client's tenant, what is configured correctly and what is misconfigured correctly. Now that sort of goes without saying. And of course, you then create that visibility as some kind of a proof of service that you are maintaining the security of the client. The first problem with standard audits is that traditionally gets shipped to a client as a PDF or some other form, or maybe it's a discussion point. And even if it is a discussion point, some remediations might be identified, and whether those are remediated or not is a whole other question. Sometimes that audit sits on a shelf and gets dusty and we don't look at it at all. Sometimes the MSP is then employed to do some remediations on that, and then of course the MSP has to spend the time doing those remediations and has to be good for that work, has to know how to do those and do those effectively. The next problem with that is the moment at which that audit is done, or the moment at which that audit is remediated, that audit is out of date immediately, unless there's some kind of a continuous nature to an audit. And how are the audit remediations and the exceptions chosen and recorded? And I think exceptions are the second thing I'd like to talk about, because exceptions, we like to say, are the rule for MSPs. If I was to choose a basis for an audit with something like Microsoft Secure Score, Microsoft Secure Score is a way of analyzing many controls across Office 365. Except then the problems start with how do we deal with the fact that Microsoft Secure Score is Microsoft's way or the highway? You can't argue with Microsoft. They give you a score. If that score is not 100%, you have to record the fact that those are exceptions, and you have to then take those exceptions and approve that you didn't hit the top score in Microsoft Secure Score. And you have to know the next time you come in that the same score you got yesterday or a different score that you got from yesterday is partially attributed to what you've already looked at, and the remainder is not what you've looked at. And that's not ideal. Realistically, from a security audit that gets remediated, you need to have a certain portion that is okay. Then you'll have a certain portion of controls or checks or balances that are exceptions, and they need to be made green, bringing up your score. And then you need to take the remainder items which get remediated and eventually bringing up your score. So all of the things that are already good, the things that are exceptions, and the things that you remediate should then bring you up to an agreed 100% of whatever the security controls or sets or things are. That is not really achievable through Microsoft Secure Score in traditional form. So you must be able to win, and that must include those exceptions as well. The second problem I have with Microsoft Secure Score is that there is no remediation built in. You have to take a look at the controls, and then you have to figure out how to fix those yourself as a client or as an MSP. And then, of course, the third problem is that like any other audit, goes out of date unless you're checking it, and you're not alerted to changes in that. And even if you are alerted, you don't know, is the score that you got yesterday the same as the score you got today in terms of what is contained within that? So really what we need from an audit capability for Office 365 is to have an agreement up front about what controls and what checks and balances are attributed to an audit. You need that audit score to contain exceptions and those exceptions to be approved. You need to be able to remediate all of these things within one application. And you need to be able to record the exceptions and also have them attributed to your winning score. And then you need to be alerted to this every day. And that makes your audit, brings it from being a one-off ad hoc tooling to a continuous element of your security delivery to your clients, whereby it is assumed that once an audit is done, remediated, exceptions are made, that you can reach 100%, and then you can sit back and wait for an alerting system to say, it's now gone to 98%. Let's remediate that, press a button, remediate back to 100%, or make an exception back to 100%. And that is really what's required before we ever get down to what the controls are in Office 365, whenever we get down to all of the things that we need to remediate. And so that's very, very important. And this is something that we do through Octiga application. We're able to create a set of baselines that create a set that you can agree with your client and that you can override, make changes to, decide on the best practice agreed with your client, and then win that game. So if I drop into any one of my tenants here on my multi-tenant dashboard, you can see there's a whole lot right and a whole lot wrong. This is what a tenant should look like before it is audited, before you start with this. Now, what goes into the best practice, that's a help too. And that's something else Octiga deliver, that we give you a set of best practices out of the box that you can clone as your baseline set, run those instantly across an onboarded tenant, and you get something like this. And then to be able to move through this and to make everything green. And only get brought back in here by an alert, say in your PSA, which Octiga integrate with, to say something about that living audit has changed and you need to remediate it. Here's the button. And so you can move through this and do this for a single tenant. And this will rapidly increase your sustainability of that audit every single day, but also the implementation time of assessing it and remediating it. Now, the sustainability time of assessing it is also very important, because if you have to go back and think about all those best practices every time, that's going to take you a lot of time. But if the best practice is given to you, like in the Octiga app, and you make changes to it and then come up with your own best practice, then that is repeatable and you can be sure of the controls that go into your audit. Then we get to a place that audit, that single tenant best practices can be raised and placed across multiple tenants. And this is when audits become a standardization, a template, and we can automate those templates. So I'll imagine a set of baselines that we decide is going to be across all tenants, or an industry vertical within our tenants, or the more secure of our tenants, or whatever cohort we decide. And that audit is then living and is monitored every day across all of these tenants and alerted to and remediated across all of these tenants. And if we choose at a later time that one of those best practice configurations or controls, we want to do those slightly differently, for example, then we go and we update that template. And that template change will filter down to all of those baselines. And we will then have a deviation in our audit, and we remediate those where it needs to be, or we make exceptions where there need to be, and we're back to 100%. Now you're at a place that you are truly auditing all of your client tenants. You are truly maintaining the audit of all your client tenants, and you have delivered that as an implementation that, after you firstly set up your baselines, is a very quick and continuous and iterative process, as opposed to a heavyweight process that you have to go in and approve and meet with your client and remediate and do again and again and again, which, let's face it, folks, simply isn't happening unless we take the time to do it. And this is what the Octiga system gives to us. We have baselines, tenant-wide baselines and group-wide baselines. We have account risk, some of the areas that are not always looked at in audits. We've got mail flow auditing, which is a continuous check on all of these mail flow. We can decide that certain rules shouldn't be made, but what happens if they crop up on any given day? And this is before we even go into any of the monitoring and breach analysis stuff, which I'll be covering in a separate topic, in a separate video. I just want to show you one thing very quick. When you first onboard a tenant with Octiga, we can look at baseline templates. And a baseline template is just a set of baselines. If you don't know what goes into those baselines, you make a clone of our Octiga best practice, which comes out of the box. It'll actually be made for you when you sign up as an MSP. And with that best practice, you can then live with it. You can change it over time. And your level 1 engineers who get that alert, who go in to remediate a change, to remediate a misconfiguration, can live in the confidence that that security set was chosen at a different time by a level 3 support engineer or an architect or the client who decided it was good. And they can have the confidence that whenever one of those baselines deviates, I'll show you an example of that they get brought in from a ticket in their PSA. They simply land into one of these baselines. It will be brought here by your PSA ticket. And they have the confidence that this setting was chosen and placed in a template at a different time, that then you can simply press remediate and away you go.